Hey, welcome to Dirt Bike Channel. This is the Iron Horse behind me. This is a sweepstakes bike for March. You can enter to win this thing by clicking the link down in the video description or going to my website, dirtbikechannel.com. And you can win this bike and the YZ450FX if you're doing this here in the month of March here in 2023. We just filmed a video where Tyler went from front to back on this thing. By the way, this is Tyler from at Enduro Builds on Instagram. He is the father and the creator of this bike. I guess kind of GasGas was. You're like this. You're like the rich stepdad that came in to made everything better.
Hey, you're the one fronting the bill. So yes. What does that make you?
I don't know. I'm just like the I don't even know what I am. But we did a video on this thing, hopefully I've already released that. If I haven't, it would be maybe the next video coming out, where we went front to back with the bike. Every single bolt on this bike was touched and upgraded. Everything down from the frame to suspension, every single piece of this thing was upgraded. But a huge part of this was the carburetor conversion, and we wanted to do its own video for that because there's so much that went involved with this. We set a budget for this bike. One of the big reasons that we maybe blew some of our budget is because there was a lot of big things we wanted to do. Everything from KYB conversion to actually swapping this over from a TPI bike to a carbureted bike. There's a lot of reasons why you may or may not want to do that, but I just wanted to get from the horse's mouth on Iron Horse here. Why did we go and spend the money? Because it was what, almost $2,000 to switch that over?
It was a big expense.
What was the reason?
For this particular project, it was primarily just to make the bike as unique as possible. And so KTM owned GasGas never made a Carb 300. So when they started with the GasGas line, all of their off-road bikes were TPI. And so I thought, hey, let's make this as unique as possible and let's convert it to a Carb. I had done it with another build of mine, and I absolutely love that bike. That's my personal bike. But it's not because I think fuel injection is terrible. I have fuel injected bikes and absolutely love them. I had 5 TPIs and didn't have a problem. I know you've had a ton. Haven't had a problem with any of them, and they've ran great. This was primarily just to make the bike unique. And then I do think there are some advantages to a carburetor. There's simplicity, there's weight. I mean, as we kind of get into things, I'll talk about that more, but the wiring harness alone on the Carb bikes is a pound lighter than the wiring harness on a TPI bike.
And then you're removing the fuel pump.
You're removing
the oil pump and the oil reservoir.
Exactly, you're removing the fuel pump in the tank. So not only are you removing potential failure points, and I mean, the oil pumps are solid. For the most part, everything's solid. People do have issues, but I think it's in the minority. But they are potential failure points, and you're eliminating those. And you're removing a lot of weight as you do that. I figured, and I've added it all kind of up, you're dropping about 6 to 7 pounds when you do a TPI to Carb conversion, which is a pretty good chunk.
That is a good chunk. We should state, like, between Tyler and me and just a few different people inside of our loose riding group, we have thousands of hours on the TPI bikes, thousands of motor hours, and not a single oil pump failure. So yes, some people have oil pump failures. So the point of this, what he's saying is, you're removing potential failure points, and you're removing weight. You're making the bike, you're making it a little bit more simple. You're making it maybe possibly easier to tune the way that you want it, because we're taking the computers mostly out of this. And,
that's another huge thing is tunability. Yes, there's minor things you can do with the TPI, but unless you send your ECU off somewhere, you can't really tune it. And even if they tune it, you're stuck with that tune. With this Bilotron carburetor, I can tune it pretty easily myself. And the nice thing about that carburetor is you really shouldn't have to touch anything.
Once you get it tuned the way you want it.
Exactly, once you get it set up. And that's been my experience in the past with the Electrons, is you set it and then you just kind of forget it and go ride, and they work great. So.
Okay, let me grab the camera and we'll come in a little bit closer here, and Tyler's gonna try to remember all 27 things that he did. He sent me a spreadsheet. It's like, it's all these things. He's like, hey, here's what I did. And it's all the line items of all the things. And the first section of like 20 things on the Excel spreadsheet, it has to do with what we're going to talk about. Okay, so here is the Bilotron carburetor up close and personal. What things can you remember? What's it going to take if somebody wants to do this? It's around a $2,000
so it depends on how you do it. It depends on what parts and components you use. but it's going to cost you anywhere from $2,000 to $2,500 to do this conversion. And so it's not a cheap conversion. And so you have to really want to have a carb to probably do this. But I'll kind of go.
You could do it with like a stock Keehan carburetor, right? You wouldn't.
Yeah, so you could save money. Yeah, you don't have to use the Billatron. You could use a Smart Carb. You could use a Keehan, a Mikuni, whatever you wanted. So yeah, you have options in some of the parts. I'll kind of tell you what you have to replace. And then, you can use aftermarket parts if you want, or you can use stock parts. All the stock parts that you have to use and that I used are from a 2019 KTM 300XC, or you can also use the Husqvarna TX300 parts. The reason you have to use those parts is because that bike was a carbureted bike, and you can steal those parts from them. The other really quick, the reason why I did it with this bike being a 23 is because going forward into 24, every single bike in the KTM brand line for 2-strokes is gonna be a fuel injected bike. So you will no longer be able to do this or be able to do it easily because you won't have parts to steal from, a carbureted version. And so it'll make it really expensive to do this. So this is for any of those bikes from 17 to 23 that are TPI. If you wanted to convert it, this is what it would entail. The first thing you have to do is decide if you want to keep the stock TPI cylinder or use the carbureted cylinder. You can use a stock TPI cylinder, but you have to plug the transfer port holes and then the crankcase pressure sensor hold right there on the back side.
Because they have additional holes here
exactly
on those
for the sensor
cylinders.
And for the injector. That's fine if you want it. There's plugs that you can use, and then you could silicone them or whatever. I chose to use the carb cylinder because I didn't want to risk a potential air leak. And so this is the cylinder and piston off a 2019 300XC. You'll need the head as well. You can use the stock TPI head if you wanted. You'll just have to block off the coolant temperature sensor. I went with the medium compression head from TSP just for performance reasons.
Did they offer this color? Was that one of the colors that they give?
That's the color, the only color it comes in. And so it works out awesome with this bike. So the other thing you have to do is replace the entire electrical system, which is unfortunate because this is a decent part of that cost.
When you say entire electrical system,
because the TPI system puts out DC voltage where the carb bikes put out the AC voltage. So it's a totally different system.
Okay.
And that entails everything from the stator and the flywheel. So both of those have to be replaced.
the stator has to be replaced.
Exactly, the stator and the flywheel. And the flywheel is like $300, which, it's too bad you can't use the TPI flywheel.
I had no idea.
You can't use the TPI flywheel though. I tried to make parts from the TPI bike work and they just won't. So flywheel, stator, the entire wiring harness. But like I said, it's a lot less complex. You're saving over a pound in just wiring. And so there's they're, like we said, they're solid bikes and they're not likely to fail, but when you're simplifying things, you're even less likely to have things fail. And so the entire wiring harness, no longer do you have the ECU, you use the CDI box, and that's from the 2019 300XE. You can buy a kit that's pretty nice. It's the KTM makes a kit for the SX250 that's a 300 kit, and it includes a cylinder piston, the CDI box and everything, and it's fairly inexpensive. They were just out of stock when I did this, but that's an option as well. You have to replace the battery box. So that's because this won't mount up, in the
this whole piece up here.
It's basically the same box, but the mounting for the CDI box is unique to the carb battery box. Then you'll have to replace the air boot on that because the The TPI air boot is different. This outlet size is different, and it has the sensor and everything. So you just replace that to the Carb air boot. If you're doing this on an XCW, you can't use the 2019 300XC air boot. You have to use it from a 2018 300 XCW, just because the air boots are different because of the linkage in PDS. It won't. This one won't clear on a PDS bike. So then you have to have a carburetor. And again, like we said, you can choose whatever you want. You have to have the intake flange here, again, for the carb. And then you can use the stock reeds from the TPI because they're the same. But for this build, we decided, to go with the B-Force 4 reeds. Then the other thing you'll have to do is replace the tank, because you have a tank, with the fuel pump and the connections down here for fuel injection coming off the tank that aren't going to work with this.
And on this build, we went with you actually have two tanks. You've got the IMS Desert tank here. This is 2.9 gallon.
Yep, so you'll have to have a carbureted tank. And so for the GasGas, if you're doing this conversion with the GasGas, that IMS 2.9 gallon tank is the only XC tank that you can use for this conversion.
The MX tank that we have, what was that from?
Well, you can use that because the MX, the MC models for the GasGas are carbureted, so you can use that. All their stock XC gas tanks.
That was from an MC 250 or something?
Yeah, the 125 and 250. You can use that tank, but it's small, right?
Okay. For motocross.
Yeah, exactly. So the problem is all their stock XC tanks are all fuel injected, every single one. So I'm glad IMS makes that tank, or wouldn't really have an option for a XC tank. With the KTMs, see, when I converted my 23 300 XCW TPI to a carb, I was able to use just the stock 2019 300 XC tank. But that's not an option for the GasGas. There's a couple other things with the GasGas specifically. There's the magnet pickup for the stator in there. You have to replace that on the GasGas. The GasGas has a different flywheel and stator than the KTM and Husky. It's actually a lighter flywheel, and that's why it has a more free revving feel to it. But they use a different pickup, and on the KTMs and Huskies, you can use that same pickup, but on the GasGas you have to replace it. So just trying to think, when you remove the oil tank, you will have a hole there in the frame, but you can either, you can put a decal over that.
How did you get this?
So this is a really cool plug, 3D printed from a company called 2Ride. You can order it from them. They make those. Other than that, I think we covered everything.
You've almost got to have a really, really good reason to do this. And in this case, the reason was, let's make something different.
Yeah, for this case, it was, let's make something that doesn't exist. When I converted my first bike, the 300 XCW, it was just for fun to see, to learn and to see what it entailed, and that's why I did it. Again, it's not because I don't like fuel injection. It's not because I think carbs are superior. Again, they're equal in my eyes. They have benefits and negatives to each system. It just kind of what you like more. I know there's a lot of people that will not buy a KTM just because it's fuel injected, which I think is silly, but
a lot of those people are going to have to rethink that now that they won't have oil pumps anymore. Because I think that's the big issue, is people were worried about oil pumps failing. Now that some of the KTM and Husky bikes won't have oil pumps, that has to be rethought.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, there's quite an investment in both labor. I mean, it's not terribly hard to do the conversion, but it is expensive. So it's something that you have to really want to do.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for doing that, and thank you so much for showing us what the deal is here. This bike, again, this bike is a sweepstakes bike in the month of March here in 2023. It's being given away along with a YZ450FX. So the way that you get entered for this thing is just to go to my website. It's dirtbikechannel.com. If you head over there, you can get all the details are there. Any orders you place on my website in the month of March automatically give you entries into it. You can also use my links to Rocky Mountain ATV, and that will do it. So, okay. If you have any questions, you can send me an email. Probably what Tyler and I will do is get together, maybe even kind of put together a little bit of maybe a rough parts list of some of the things that you're going to need if you want to do something like this. But it's not for the faint of heart, as you've seen. It isn't just like, oh, I'm just going to like get a carburetor and plug a couple bolts and maybe plug a couple of sensors. There's a lot more to this. It's expensive, but it's pretty cool. So we're excited to see who wins this bike and see what they think of their carbureted converted GasGas Iron Horse. So until next time, thanks so much and leave a single track.